Hello, Sparkian. This is Kingsley Grant from Happier Marriage Secrets, where we are on a mission to make marriages happier again. And today we are talking about the 5 ways to unlock emotional intelligence for a stronger marriage. And if you are wondering why I refer to you as a Sparkian, it's simply because I believe you want to put the spark back into your marriage or put more spark in your marriage. And I think that you would agree to that. And one of the ways that to do that is to use the ruler concept. It's an evidence-based approach to social and emotional learning developed at Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence. Ruler is simply an acronym for this 5 skills of emotional intelligence that was developed by Dr. Mark Brackett. And these 5 emotional intelligence skills, based upon the ruler as an acronym, the concept, are simply this. I'll let you list them for you, and then we'll unpack them in a few moments. The first one is the R, recognizing emotions. The second one is understanding emotions, for the U. The third one is labeling emotions. And the fourth one is expressing emotions. And the fifth one is regulating emotions. Now, we're going to unpack all 5 of them in this episode number 72 of the Happier Marriage Secrets podcast. Now, these 5 skills are essential for building and maintaining healthy relationships, both in your own personal and professional life. And you'll see in a moment why I'm making that very bold statement. Now, as married Christian professionals, we have a unique opportunity, right, to use our emotional intelligence to be a light in the world, in our marriages, and build a stronger marriage that becomes a testimony to the world that marriages can be happier. Marriages can be more fulfilling. Marriages can last. And doesn't mean it's perfect. Doesn't mean they won't have their ups and downs and the different challenges that they would have. And I'm speaking from experience, having been married for 38 years as of this recording. And I'll tell you more about that in a few moments. But I just wanted to mention that up front to let you know that this episode and this unpacking of these 5 emotional intelligence skills truly will make a difference in your marriage if you listen and you hopefully take notes, copious notes, but also if you'll implement or apply them to your life. And what better way to easily remember these 5 skills by using the ruler concept, right, as an acronym. And I'll again unpack that for you. So stay tuned as we get into this episode.
So the big question is this: how is it possible that you have a happier marriage when you feel like you've tried everything? Your spouse isn't making an effort. You're exhausted. You feel like giving up. Or there's so much hurt that's taken place between you and your spouse. That is the question, and this podcast will give you the answers.
Now, as you've just heard, this show is designed to provide you with information and resources to help you have a happier and more fulfilled marriage. And this episode is one more giant step in fulfilling that goal as we unpack the 5 ways to unlock emotional intelligence for a stronger marriage using the ruler concept. Now, the first concept is the skill of being able to recognize your own emotions and the emotions of others. That is very important. Notice I did not say or, because it's a both and. This goes hand in hand. It's very, very important to understand that this is all about being able. The first skill, the very first foundational skills that you need is this one here, based upon the studies and based upon the research and based upon the very longitudinal study that talks about emotional intelligence, where it is amazing how many people lack emotional intelligence. And maybe in your marriage, you're finding that one of the struggles, even though you may not be able to put your finger on what it is, but hopefully as I unpack today, you'll recognize that this skill, emotional intelligence, or these 5 skills of emotional intelligence, will make a difference in your marriage. So let's begin to unpack these skills. The first one, as I mentioned, is to do with the letter R. Now, the R stands for recognizing emotions, emotions. This is the first step, right, in emotional intelligence, is recognizing, as I mentioned, your own emotions and the emotions of others. See, most people are, and let's not put most, many people do not and cannot even identify or state, label what emotions they're experiencing. You'll hear many times, people will say, I'm so angry, right? I'm so upset. And those are true emotions, right? But if you ask them to kind of unpack what is behind the anger, because anger is a secondary emotion, is not a primary emotion. It shows up that way, but behind anger are really the minutia, the micro aspect of their emotions. And so many people are unable to identify. As a matter of fact, one study that I've looked at when I wrote my book on, I call it emotelligence, right? Emotelligence. And it's basically being able to identify your emotions. It's more about leadership. So that book I wrote has to do with leadership, both in the home and in the workplace. So it was focused on that, about becoming the leader that everyone loves and wants to follow, right? So, but when I was doing my research and looking at emotional intelligence, one of the things I came across was very interesting was 69% or 68% thereabout of people, a majority of people, 68% do not, are unable to truly identify and clearly label the emotions they're experiencing, right? That means only one third are pretty much emotionally intelligent to be able to do that. So I can imagine if almost 70% of people are unable to, no wonder in your relationship or in your marriage, you might be experiencing, unless you're that 1/3, you're experiencing this challenge of being able to recognize your own emotions and then to also the emotions of your spouse. This is critical. Now, it can be very difficult, especially when we are feeling overwhelmed or stress in our lives. But it's important to be able to pay attention to our bodies and our minds to get a sense of what we are feeling. Now, here's an example. Maybe you're feeling frustrated at work because you have a lot of deadlines to meet, right? Sounds familiar? I know. I even this, as I recording this episode, I have had a very, I wouldn't say stressful, but I felt like I had so much to get done and I felt frustrated. So maybe like me, you're feeling frustrated at work because of all the deadlines you have. And you notice that your heart is racing and your palms maybe are sweaty, right? Your heartbeat is pounding fast. And there are other physical signs that you might be experiencing. Now, once you recognize that you're feeling stressed, you can take steps to manage that. That is being able to, that is what emotional intelligence or recognizing emotion, the skills of emotional intelligence. This one skill of recognizing your emotion is being able to identify what is it you're feeling. I love what the Bible says when it comes to this emotion of recognizing our emotions. The psalmist David prayed, and he said in Psalm 139, he said, "Search me, O God, and know my heart. Test me and know my anxious thoughts. See if there's any offensive way in me and lead me into the way everlasting. Lead me in the way everlasting. So David recognized there was something going on within him, and he is seeking outside help. Now, it's important to know that you can get outside help, but the greatest help that, especially for us who have a God-centered life or marriage, is to ask God to help you to identify. And David leads the way, and he said, God, you know my heart, so help me to see what my thoughts are. To know my anxious thoughts. And he said, see if there's any offensive way in me that has come about because of his anxiety, and lead me in the way everlasting. So there is a very this principle of being able to recognize your emotions is one that you can, is where you are sensitive to that and being able to identify what that is, but also being able to look at your spouse and see possibly what emotion is at play in their lives as well. So the first one is recognizing the emotion. The second skill of the U of the ruler concept is understanding emotions. So the first one is recognizing. This one now has to do with being able to understand. So once you've recognized your own emotions and the emotions of others, and namely your spouse, it is important to understand what's causing them. What are the thoughts? What are the beliefs? Because our beliefs shapes our behaviors, right? What are the beliefs that are driving that emotion that you're experiencing? What are the thoughts and beliefs that are driving the emotions of the other person, your wife or your husband? What possibly could be the thoughts and beliefs? Now, it's important to not assume that you know what they are. I hear sometimes in interchange or exchange between a couple, a husband will say, why are you so mad? Or why are you so angry? Why are you so upset? Now, they're basing that label on what their brain associates with anger or upset or whatever else they're describing. But the chance is they could be incorrect. Maybe you've had that happen to you, or maybe you have done that, and your spouse may have said to you, or you may have said to your spouse, I'm not angry. I'm not upset. And possibly you're not. But in their minds, what they're seeing and hearing, that's the only thing they can use to describe that. So it's very important when you're trying to understand the emotions of your spouse that you do not step into that with negative assumptions, right? Negative assumptions. Now, there are ways to do that. We won't unpack all of that because we won't have time to do that here. But there are ways to actually step away from the assumptive role, right? To be able to understand. Now, here's an example. Maybe your spouse is feeling angry because maybe you didn't call to let them know you were running late, maybe to come home, maybe it's dinner, maybe it's an appointment, maybe it's a date, whatever it was. And you can try to understand the anger of your spouse by asking yourself, what might they be thinking and feeling, right? What are you hearing here? As empathy, right? Maybe they're thinking that you don't care about them or that you're not reliable. And you could put that and insert that into the equation, which causes you to approach that situation very carefully because you're trying to understand. One of the things I hear as a licensed marriage family therapist and a certified relationship coach, I hear this often where a spouse will say to me, they don't understand. They don't get it. And what they're seeking for is to be understood. To be understood. I love what the late Stephen Covey have said, seek not to be understood, but seek to understand rather than to be understood. So that's what we have to use to proceed by trying to understand rather than seeking to be understood right away. So this is where we slow things down. And so we're trying to understand what our spouse might be experiencing, feeling, or thinking why they might be as worked up emotionally as they are. I love what the Bible teaches about understanding the emotions of others. In Colossians 3, Paul was writing, he says, "Therefore, as God's chosen people, holy and dearly loved, clothe yourselves with compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience." And then he went on to say this, "Bear with each other and forgive one another. If any one of you has a grievance against another, forgive as the Lord forgave you." So you see, this is where the emotions, the empathy and compassion and kindness and humility, these are the fruit that God says the Spirit will bring into our lives. And this will help you to really manage in trying to understand the emotions. And that's why I said many times, even though I counsel and, have therapy with people who are not, practicing Christians, or even say they are, but I still see them anyway, and I don't impose on them my own beliefs, but I still struggle sometimes because I find that there is a need to have a God factor, because God can truly help in times like this, because I believe that to do these things, to walk in humility and compassion and kindness and gentleness and patience of all things, and learn to forgive, man, it requires supernatural strength, wouldn't you say? Because some of these things are just not within our capacity, our natural capacity to do, because we're all selfish. We want what we want for ourselves. So we're being called to do something is other-centered. So trying to understand, it does take some work. And that's why I believe with the help of God, it makes it much easier. The third skill of emotional intelligence based upon the ruler concept is, right? So once you've recognized and understood your own emotions and the emotions of others, namely your spouse, it's important to label them correctly, right? It means putting a name to what you're feeling, right? So name what it is you're experiencing. And so again, I could say, I was saddened by, or I felt sad. Now, the labeling aspect of things is very important, because when you're trying to label and then to communicate that, it's important, and I talk more about that in the next two skills, but it's important that you recognize the difference between an emotional expression or communicating your emotions and not your opinion and your thoughts. The rule of thumb that I teach so often is this, that if you're expressing your feelings, and I'll unpack that a little bit more later, but so let me hold on that thought. So you got to wait for the E of this ruler concept where I talk more about that there. So let's just kind of put that on hold, on the shelf. I'll get back to that if you remind me. Anyway, so here's an example. Maybe you're feeling sad because you missed your friend's wedding, right? Now, you can label that emotion by saying, I'm feeling sad because I missed my friend's wedding. Now, so labeling your emotions is important, because what it does, it helps you to process them and to communicate them to others. So if you don't know, then you don't know, right? It's hard to work on something you don't know what it is to work on, what it is to do something about. And it also helps you to develop the vocabulary, your emotional vocabulary, to talk about your emotions in a healthy way, right? So if you notice what, in this one example, if you're feeling sad about something that you missed, something that happened, notice how it's spoken. I am feeling sad because I missed my friend's wedding. Now, let me just break that down real quickly here. The first 3 to 4 words is basically how you know whether or not you're talking about your feelings or you're talking about your opinion or your thoughts. Because if you require more than 3 to 4 words to express your feelings, the rule of thumb, there's exceptions to everything, right? But the rule of thumb is this, then you're actually sharing your opinion. For example, someone may say, I feel like you don't understand me. That is not a feeling, my friend. That is what? An opinion. You're having an opinion about something, which is quite okay. There's nothing wrong with that. But be able to understand that is not a feeling you're expressing. It's an opinion. So it have to fit within 3 to 4 words of a feeling, and then you get the context of where the feeling comes from. Like in this case, I'm feeling sad, right? 4 words, because I missed my friend's wedding. Context, right? So it's the feelings within the context that you're describing, and you're labeling the emotions called sadness, right? Because when you're able to identify that, you're able to talk more about it and do something about it. If you don't know, it's harder to. I love what the Bible teaches on about labeling emotions. In Psalm 42, David writes, "Why, my soul, are you so downcast within me? Why you're so disturbed within me?" Right? So he identified what was going on in his soul. And then he says to his soul, where he identified the emotions, he said, "Put your hope in God, for I will yet praise him, my Savior and my God." So you see what David is doing? He's identifying the emotion that's at play within him. And then he is now able to, in a very intelligent manner, in a very straightforward manner, to do something about the emotions. He says to his soul, "Put your hope in God." Imagine you're feeling anxious, and you're simply saying, "Okay, I find that I'm feeling anxious right here about now." And you're saying, "Okay, I have identified the emotions called anxiety. What can I now do to lessen my anxiety?" So you could say, you could make a prayer. You could pray about it. And the Bible says also, be anxious about nothing, but in all things, in prayer and supplication, make your request made known to God. So we now have a plan, a strategy, an action plan, what to do with the emotion. See, once you're identifying and you've labeled it, now you have a better chance of managing and working on that. Now, that's number 3. Now, the 4th and 5th skill, before I share those with you, the last 2 emotional intelligence skills, please oblige me to share a few important announcements that I believe will be helpful to you. Now, I want to say, first of all, this show is being sponsored by KingsleyGrant.com, KingsleyGrant.com, where you can find helpful resources that can help you in your marriage. And you can go there and see what those resources are. So let me also ask you to subscribe to this show, to subscribe to this podcast, so you'll be notified of any and all future podcasts episode that I do release in this podcast. Thirdly, if you would like a quick way to assess the state of your marriage and what you need to do to make it even better, let me suggest that you take the assessment quiz at helpingmarriagesecrets.com/quiz, helpingmarriagesecrets.com/quiz. And the links will be in the show notes that follow this episode as well. But there you'll be able to access a very 90 seconds or so. You'll be able to take that quiz and assess what your marriage is like and what you might need to do in the next step. Now, if you're new to the podcast and you're a little curious about who I am and to be hosting this podcast and speaking the way that I do, here's a brief, I would say, an intro, just a brief intro of who I am. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist, as you heard me mention, and a certified relationship coach, and have had the privilege of working with hundreds of couples for almost 2 decades, and have seen countless numbers of them experiencing transformation, turnaround in their marriages. So I know what works and what doesn't. I think I've been around long enough, but also let me add this caveat to this, because I've been married for 38 years as of this recording, with 2 adult children. So, add that to the fact that I'm also a published author, and I'm not here bragging. I'm just letting you know, just in case you're wondering. So some of what I'm talking about is from my own personal experience, but also from my professional experiences as well. And just to help you, just in case you were not sure of who I am. Now, so what are the last 2 ways to unlock emotional intelligence for a stronger marriage using the ruler concept? Well, the fourth one is the E, right? So first, the R is recognizing the emotions. The U is understanding the emotions. The L is labeling the emotions. And now we get to number 4, which is expressing emotions, Once you've recognized, understood, and labeled your emotions, right, it's important to express them in a healthy way, But we see more often than not unhealthy way of expressing emotions. As you can just imagine, maybe you've been caught up in that. Maybe you have been in the crosshairs of that when your spouse or you got emotionally hijacked and you got worked up and you said things that you didn't want to say or heard things said to you that you thought was not right. And, it put a divide and sour the relationship. So you may have experienced that or maybe have been guilty of that yourself. So we're talking more about a healthy way of expressing our emotions. This means communicating your emotions to others, right, to your spouse, in a way that is respectful, but yet assertive, not aggressive. That's a problem. Many people do. They express their emotions aggressively, and that is not the way. That's never healthy. Aggressive expression of emotions is never healthy. However, assertive expression can be healthy, is healthy. And there's a difference, a very important difference that needs to be mentioned about that. So let me give you an example. Maybe you're feeling frustrated at work because you have mentioned about a lot of deadlines, feeling frustrated because your boss is on top of you or the deadlines, right? You know you need to meet a certain goal or, and you're just not, you're behind. And your boss is on you and saying, I'm feeling frustrated because I have a lot of deadlines to meet and I'm not sure you're going to be able, to finish everything on time. Right? Now you're frustrated. And so what happens is those frustration expression by your boss or by you, if that you are the boss, for example, or maybe you're saying that to somebody or to yourself, that's not healthy. That is one way to set you up for unhealthy interactions, right? Unnecessary conflicts. So it's important to express your emotions in a healthy way because what that does, it builds trust and intimacy and feeling safer. Your spouse will feel safer with you and you'll feel safer with them in your marriage. And it also helps to minimize or lower your stress level and also possibly conflict. It helps avoid conflict. So these are things that a healthy expression of your emotions can lead to. Now, the Bible also teaches us to express our emotions in a healthy way because in Ephesians 4, again, Paul writes, he says this very important statement. You may have heard this yourself. In your anger, do not sin, right? Do not let the sun go down while you are still angry. And do not give the devil a foothold. So Paul is simply saying, in anger, if you are not managing that emotion, you're going to end up expressing that emotion in an unhealthy way. And what happened, that is a sin, that you've crossed the line. So when people get angry, they slam the door, they swear, they raise their voices, all that stemmed from anger. And that the Bible calls that sin because you would not have normally done that if you were not worked up, right? So you've crossed the line. So the idea is to manage. And Paul says, don't go to the sun go down upon that. Don't end your day and go into bed because you're only worked up and the devil will have a foothold because he can begin to work on your mind and suggest ideas, right? While you're laying down, and it could go on and on as you may have experienced. And as you know, right? Are you tracking with me? Would you say yes? Amen. Okay. The last one is of the ruler. So we have, we mentioned before is recognizing your emotions, the understanding emotions. Now, again, recognizing your emotions and the emotions of your spouse, right? Understand your emotions, labeling the emotions correctly, expressing the emotions, and now we on the last R is regulating. This is the big one, right? This is the big one where people will say, man, it's easier said than done. And I'll say, you are right. You're right. But anything that's worth something should begin hard. I say this, maybe kind of corny, but it's true that the only place you find easy coming before hard is in the dictionary. Every other place in life, hard comes before easy. The things you do today that are easy did not begin that way. So this is the final step in the ruler concept. It means managing your emotions in a way that is appropriate. It's appropriate for the situation. It's not over the top. It's not like an inappropriate kind of expression. So many people, many times, they do not regulate their emotions appropriately. And, if you're a parent, maybe your kid worked you up and pushed your buttons so much that your expression was one where it caused great damage and great fear and great anxiety and depression in your child. It was your reaction was over the top. Maybe it's your spouse who don't feel safe around you anymore because your expression was such where it frightened them, it scared them, it caused them to tremble, and in their mind they can't get that out of their mind, and so they're traumatized or re-traumatized by something that they experienced with you because you did not regulate your emotions properly, or they did not regulate their emotions properly and cause that with you. So the final step in this is regulating your emotions. It means managing your emotions in a way that is appropriate for the situation. I love what the Bible says, that God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of love and power and a sound mind. And then he also said that the fruit of the Spirit that God has given to us have identified self-control as an aspect of the fruit. So when you say, I can't, and I'm just, I have a temper, that you're simply saying that you don't think God has given that to you and God can help you. And you're kind of dissing that basically. But you're also saying that you're not in control. Your emotions is in control of you. Well, my friend, listen, that should not be the case. You should be the one who manages and be the one who controls your emotions and not be controlled by your emotions. Am I saying that you won't have moments of where you lose it? Of course, we all have those moments. So don't hear me saying that it's a perfect day. You're never, ever going to have a moment where you regret saying something or doing something. I have had many, many of those moments as a husband, as a father, as a friend, as a coworker, as a therapist. So I've had my own share, but I don't excuse and say because I've had them means that's the way it is. No, I have to take responsibility, and so do you. So here's an example. Maybe you're feeling angry at your spouse because they didn't call you, like I mentioned before, about something, right? Or they did not tell you about something and you found out about it later on. For example, a charge to the credit card, or maybe they, whatever it is, they didn't follow through on something that they said they were going to do, and it's costing you more money, whatever that was, right? And so you have this outburst, or they had this outburst over the top, because at the end of the day, again, please hear me. I'm not saying those moments may not happen. I'm just saying it should be the exception, not the rule. So it should be where you do more regulating than you do exploding, right? In rage, or in, as the Bible said, be angry but not sin. So that's rage when you go beyond that point. So the idea is, how do you regulate your emotions? I would simply say, pray about it, ask God to help you each day, and work on that. Be very intentional. Speak over yourself, speak well about yourself. Have even affirmations that you can talk about. For example, today I am a person that regulate my emotions, or I control my emotions. They do not control me. And just live your day in light of that with God's help, right? So those are the 5 aspects of the emotional intelligence, using the skills, using the ruler concept: recognizing your emotions, understanding your emotions, labeling your emotions, expressing your emotions, and regulating your emotions. these 5 concepts or skills, I do hope you're going to implement. And I would love to hear your thoughts on what it is you heard today. Now, these skills are essential, like I mentioned before, for building and maintaining healthy marriages, healthy relationships, both in your personal and professional life outside of your marriage, right? So as a married Christian professionals, I think it also gives us an opportunity to be a light in a dark world, to show what, with God's help, what's possible. And so when we're able to recognize, understand, label, express, and regulate our emotions, here's what's going to happen. We're going to be able to communicate with our spouse more effectively. We're able to resolve conflict more effectively. And we're going to be able to build intimacy in a more effective manner, right? What's your thoughts? I believe that you would agree with me on that. Now, if you're interested in learning more about your marriage and how you can make it even happier, I want to encourage you to take the Happier Marriage Assessment at happiermarriagesecrets.com/quiz and get your results and see what it is your next step would look like. Now, this assessment is free and it's confidential, and it will give you a personalized feedback on what it is your report says, and also, like I mentioned, what your next step will look like, right? So again, thank you for taking the time to listen as we talk about these 5 aspects of the emotional intelligence using the ruler approach. And then, of course, recognizing emotions. That's paying attention to your own emotions and the emotions of others. Understanding emotions, identifying the thoughts and beliefs that are driving your emotions and the emotions of your spouse. Labeling emotions is putting a name onto your emotions, right? And expressing emotions is communicating your emotions to others in a respectful and assertive way. And regulating emotions is managing your emotions in a way that is appropriate for the situation. So, my friend, I hope that this podcast episode has been helpful. Remember, emotional intelligence is a skill that can be learned and improved with practice. And I'm one that can tell you from personal experience that it's possible. And if I can work on it, I'm not there yet. I'm still working on mine, but I'm far way ahead of where I used to be. So if it can happen to me, trust me, it can happen to you as well. So be patient with yourself and keep learning. So God bless, and make sure you subscribe to the show. And if you want to learn more about other things that I do, and if you watch a lot of videos, make sure you're watching my YouTube channel at Kingsley Grant. So peace out. God bless you. And I'll see you on the flip side.